Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back to the channel. It's the Music Stupid, another edition where I pick 5 records, plus a bonus this time, a 6th record. Now, this version of It's the Music Stupid, that's the mantra. It's the music. That's me saying it to myself. It's the music first, no matter how the record sounds. Yes, good sound, but first the music. This is inspired by the pub Jukebox. It's a series of videos, a series of collaborative videos, primarily, well, always hosted by John Sixcents pianist out of Birmingham, and Headley, another fat man with a beard, talking about music. They're the two, I want to say protagonists, the hosts, I should say. And they bring on usually one guest or two guests, and they do these videos about once a month. I've been on a couple of them. You get a mix of Americans and Brits and everything. And I watched one early this morning as of this recording. So this is 24 hours ago by the time you see this video. And it was one with Harris Pilton out of the UK and Madam Sin in London. And 3 of the 4 people I've met a year ago, almost exactly, this coming weekend when I was in London for my birthday weekend. And we hung out. We actually went to pubs. And there is a running joke, and they like bleed at the beginning of the video. There's a link below. So if you don't watch these, they're very entertaining. This one goes on about an hour and a half, but just put it on in the background. And each participant gets to put a quid in the jukebox and pick 2 tracks. And they share 2 singles. Headley tends to go usually in the folk, country, rootsy music. John usually, but not always, goes in the kind of soul and funk and R&B stuff, but he gets into some punk things and other things. Herrick Hilton is all over the place, a lot of good, mostly British music, but there are exceptions here. Punk and new wave and 12-inch singles. And Madam Sin is one of the most knowledgeable people in rock and roll records and 45s, a lot of American stuff. And Madam Sin, Paul, never understands why us Americans are so fascinated by all these like the fucking Beatles all the time, right? He's into a lot of American everything from Motown and rock and roll, and of course Little Richard, a lot of stuff. And he is so knowledgeable on 45s. Apparently he lived in DC for a while when he was younger, but he plays records on his channel. But I'm going to put a link below to this last one, but subscribe. And when those pop up, watch them. When John does his videos, they're pretty much R&B, soul specific. And he is one of the most knowledgeable people. So I picked 5 records plus a bonus at the end based on this. Now, these aren't all the records that they picked in this particular episode, but I'll talk about it. They did pick a lot of these artists, or at least mention them. And I thought it was a good way for me to kind of dig into my collection, and maybe something I haven't pulled out in a long time. So here we go. The most obvious, where they kind of started at the beginning, after I was mocked for my lack of Big Gulp Guinness glasses in the pub last year. Literally slowly sipping a Guinness instead of guzzling it like those Brits do, 3-to-1 in terms of the ratio from what they were drinking from what I was drinking. But Headley mentioned a cover version, which I was not aware of, but I want to show the original. This is Loudon Wainwright III. This is his 3rd album, so 3 on 3. This is from 1972, and the song is his biggest song. It was a hit the top 20 in America in 1973. It's Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road. Kind of a novelty song, but great record. I have about 5 of his early records on Atlantic and on Columbia Records, and they're great. And Loudon was married for a short time to Kate McGarrigle from the McGarrigle sisters. They had 2 kids, Rufus Wainwright and Martha Wainwright, musicians and singers in their own right, great musicians. His stuff tends to be more on the country rock, folk rock, rootsy stuff. He's also an actor. He's been on TV shows like Freaks and Geeks and Undeclared, and a lot of Judd Apatow things where he's added musical interludes as well as his acting career somewhat. But produced a lot of records, originally from Chapel, North Carolina, and then, of course, got hooked up with all those Canadians. But this is a really good record. This record, again, 1972, this was produced by Thomas Jefferson Kay. Another great producer, one of my favorite records that he produced was No Other by Gene Clark, the failed record in terms of commercial viability that turned into this cult classic for the former Byrds member Gene Clark. I love that record. Thomas Jefferson Kay would move to San Francisco and live in the Bay Area for a long time in the 70s as well. But there's a lot of other good stuff on here. He does have, again, a country rock sound, a rootsy sound. He's got a really kind of a wonderful, quirky, attractive tenor voice, a vocal style. And I just think these records are fabulous. So Headley picked a different cover version of Dead Skunk, more of a funky soul version on today's pub, where that link is below. Just enjoy it for what it is. It's a fun discussion. So starting out with Loudon Wainwright III, his third album, 1972. They also talk about Johnny Cash, and they mentioned Folsom Prison. Of course, he did the two big prison albums initially. In 1968, this was a big comeback record for Johnny Cash. I don't think he had a top hit for about 5 or 6 years when this was put out, and he pulled out of his catalog a song that he had been doing on the road all this time. That's Folsom Prison Blues. I think he originally recorded it in either 1955 or 1956, but a live record at Folsom Prison. Of course, the following year, he'd have an even bigger record. I think this is the better of the two, live at San Quentin with that hit, Boy Named Sue. I think that was slightly bigger, but this is a fantastic record. Of course, it has the Statler brothers were here. Carl Perkins was there. Obviously, June Carter, Cash, and of course, his wonderful band. But this is a great record. Cover photograph by Jim Marshall, that great photographer. There's a whole book of Jim Marshall's work of this. There's an expanded CD set with all the entire show. With you hear Carl Perkins. I think Carl Perkins does sing on one track with him on this. But not only do you have Folsom Prison Blues, you have Cocaine Blues. You have a version of Orange Blossom Special, and of course the classic song, A Long Black Veil. Jackson co-sung with June Carter. That was so wonderful on this. Green Grass of Home. But a fabulous. Again, I did get this in 1968, so this was crossing over. This style of country music was crossing over. And 68 was a good year for country albums crossing over on the pop charts on Billboard and Cashbox in America. But a fabulous record. This is pretty much my introduction to Johnny Cash. And then I would go back and get the early stuff, and of course the Sun Record stuff, and the $1 Million Quartet, and just everything of Johnny Cash. All in on Johnny Cash. Only saw him once. It was a Fillmore show, one of the few Fillmore shows where they had chairs where you sat down, and this would have been in the 90s. And which it was the acoustic, basically, band, upright bass guitar, and June Carter, and it was one of the best things I've ever seen. So what a great record. Folsom Prison, Johnny Cash on Columbia Records, 1968. They also mentioned a different song on the Jukebox today, and that was the great Tammy Wynette. Of course, Tammy Wynette and Loretta Lynn would be the big two female singers that really captured the pop charts, crossing over somewhat, mostly the country charts. But again, they were stepping in over on the pop charts in America. This is another 1968 country record, also on Columbia Records, or is this on Epic? This might be Epic. This is Epic, basically the sister label of Columbia. Produced by the great Billy Sherrill. Billy Sherrill, of course, Nashville producer, obviously did the stuff with Tammy Wynette and her husband for a while, George Jones. Great records. Anytime you see Tammy Wynette, George Jones records, you need to pick them up. He also would go on to produce Charlie Rich's Behind Closed Doors. Great 1970s country record. I love that record too, but just a great producer. 1968, DIVORCE became official today. Great song, kind of you know, you could look at it from when you're a young 14-year-old rock fan. It seems like a kitschy kind of over the top song, but I love this record. And of course, the following year in '69, Stand By Your Man is probably her signature song. But this is great on here. It also has, it opens up with Gentle on My Mind, the Jimmy Webb song. Of course, that was a big hit for Glenn Campbell on here. You do have a Beatles song. She does cover Yesterday on here. Uh, the Legend of Bonnie Clyde. Can remember 1968 Bonnie Clyde, 67, 68, I guess. The movie Bonnie Clyde was, I remember seeing that as a young lad, and the most violent film I had seen up to that time. And that was very explicit, of course. The final scene in that movie, you know, when all the bullets are just plowing them, it seemed like it was an hour, but it was what, probably 5 minutes or something. But a great record, great country singer. You know, Dolly Parton would come a little later. Dolly Parton was doing those records in the late '60s, I guess, with Porter Wagoner, and that is great stuff. So this is DIVORCE by Tammy Wynette. The next artist they talked about were the Carpenters. So they went to it was an interesting divide this time. Sometimes they get punk, sometimes they get soulful. Sometimes it gets schloggy. It does, you know, post-punk, and all kinds of music. Great rock and roll roots music. The Carpenters. They're talking about the Carpenters, Karen Carpenter. What a voice she had. And she did have a great voice. And she could play drums at the same time. I mean, I remember We've Only Just Begun was literally the type that line of lyric was across my high school graduation yearbook from 1972. But Richard and Karen Carpenter, one of the greatest duets of all time. Obviously not soulful, very middle of the road, very easy listening, but they made great records. Some unusual things like covering Klaatu's Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft. What a wild song. Now this is like a 90s comp, mid-90s comp. And those of you who watch my show may remember, and if you're new, almost 5 years ago, my good friend Coleman died, and Coffee Dave and I bought his collection, and in every record we sold, we did auctions on it. We kept a bunch of records ourselves, but we put this card in every record, a tribute to Coleman's catalog, and there's a whole bio on the back on this, and I miss my buddy, but a couple records, more than a couple, like 700 records I kept. I doubled my soul section. I got a great rootsy, some original UK Kinks and Stones and Who albums, and that I didn't have those versions of. But I got this double comp. What's interesting about this main reason I kept it, not only because I wanted a good comp of the Carpenters, but it says to Coleman, and this is a Richard Carpenter. So this is, 1985. I was a decade wrong. 5/22/85. Autographed by Richard Carpenter when this double comp came out. So of course the Carpenters, one of the great duos of all time. Yeah, middle of the road, but come on. She could play drums and sing at the same time and made some great pop records on A&M Records throughout the 1970s. Little Richard. Now, Madam Sin, when asked about his favorite artist or favorite rock artist, R&B artist, really crossing over, really a rock artist. I mean, a black artist who is more identified with rock and roll than soul music. I mean, he had a unique voice, and his music really, crossed over to a whole wide variety of audiences, and like one of the true originals, definitely, Little Richard. But I'm showing something a little different, and it's an unreleased album initially in 1972. And I thought what I would do is take a little bit of Madam Sin, Paul's choices, and mix it with what Headley would choose. My guess is if he was picking a Little Richard album, and that's Little Richard, Southern Child. This initially was unreleased in 1972. This is a recent issue. I think this was a record store day a few years ago on Omnivore Records. I think this is out of print. You can still get the CD version. You have to find a used copy. This should be in print. So Omnivore, if you're watching, can you release this? I don't know if you have the rights. They've done a lot of great, the 70s reprise records that are not always remembered, but they're killer records to some extent. And Reprise refused to put this out, put something else out instead. This is a soulful country record. I mean, this is what would have been the original cover, apparently. I mean, come on. How great is this? Little Richard doing funky country music. California, I'm coming. If you pick her too hard, she comes out of tune. Burning Up with Love, Ain't No Tears. Last year's Racehorse. Can't run in this year's race. Southern Child, Puppy Dog song. Produced by Bumps Blackwell, who produced a number of Little Richard records around this time. But this is a fantastic, funky, soulful record. You know, it's not that same kind of screaming, but we know, and he knows how great he is. This is a wonderful record. You know, I think people have forgotten these great early rock and roll artists like Jerry Lee Lewis and of course Little Richard and all of them. Even in the 50s, I am a huge fan, and they didn't call him out today, but I'm a huge fan of Ricky Nelson records. I don't know why I think of him in the same ring, because people think of him as a lighter thing because of Ozzy and Harriet, but he had that great rhythm section, or the guitar of James Burton and Glendy Harding that would later go on to play with Elvis Presley, and even later with Graham Parsons and then Emmylou Harris, and just a great tight band. And I bring that up because I recently showed a reissue, an unreleased thing of stripped back Hollywood Sunset Boulevard recordings of Elvis Presley. And several people mentioned, you forgot to mention those people were playing with Ricky Nelson. Well, I didn't really forget. That just wasn't part of this particular story. But yes, they were with Ricky Nelson before they played with Elvis Presley and became his house band. So those are the 5 records. Here's the bonus record. At the end of that video, it got a little sentimental because John from Birmingham talked about just in the last month or so the Black Sabbath reunion and Ozzy doing this concert, giving all this money to charities in Birmingham, and it really kind of warmed the hearts of Burmese, of the people, and people from around the world came to see that concert. And of course, just within about 2 weeks, he died. Ozzy Osbourne died. I didn't pick a Black Sabbath record. As much as I like Sabbath, I'm not an all-in Sabbath person. I think John kind of emulated that. I kind of feel like that. But I thought I'd pick up a record I've been playing lately, a band from Birmingham from 1980, and this is the debut album of Dexy's Midnight Runners, and this is Searching for the Young Soul Rebels, a great blue-eyed northern soul album, funky, soulful. This is a later pressing on Fame, the budget label that came out in like 83, 84. I did have the original version, and I think I loaned it to someone, which is really rare for me, and I never got it back because I bought this at Rough Trade Records in San Francisco. Rough Trade in the 80s, early 80s, opened their only American store at that time on 6th Street, and a lot of punk singles, post-punk singles and albums, pretty much all imported music and records, and of course the great import cover. But again, this is the Fame version, still a great record. In America, of course, on MTV, when their next album came out, Dexy's Midnight Runners would become huge in America because of Come On Eileen. But I think this is the kicker. This is the one record. That's great too. And I love their version of Jackie Wilson Said, the Van Morrison song. But what a great record. Burn It Down. There is a kind of a soulful political thing with all this kind of music. Apparently, Two Tone wanted to sign them, the Specials, and of course Selector, but they did their own thing on a different label. I don't know that whole history yet. Let's let John talk about them again. But what a great record. Really soulful, funky, horn-based Northern Soul record. Kevin Rowland, the lead singer, had a very unique voice, interesting voice, and just very charismatic. Like, not this perfect voice, but perfect for this type of music. And they were kicking it with their wardrobe, with their sound. and they crossed over because of MTV. I mean, MTV really helped bands like this cross over that maybe wouldn't have been played in America on American radio, even FM radio. Too soulful, too funky, too bad, right? But thank you for watching. Go watch the pubs, the pub jukebox. It's a fun series. I'm not sure if John has a playlist there. And the four gentlemen on this week's episode, I just enjoy it. And every time those come up, I'll listen for an hour, hour and a half. And sometimes they meander, but that's the fun of it. It's like sitting with your best mates in the pub, talking about music, putting on the jukebox, and sharing half a Guinness. Okay, so thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.